everyone. I'm thrilled to be here today on behalf of Charlotte, guest hosting MyArtBroker Talks. I'm Erin, the commissioning editor of Edition magazine, and I'm so happy to be joined here today by Richard Polsky, who, if you don't know, has been working in the art world for over 40 years, exhibiting, buying, and selling works by leading pop artists. He's also authored two fantastic books on Andy Warhol and the Warhol market, titled I Bought an Andy Warhol and I Sold an Andy Warhol Too Soon, alongside his series, The Art Market Guide. Today, Richard works alongside major auction houses and us here at MyArtBroker to authenticate works by Warhol, Haring, Lichtenstein, Basquiat, and others. I'm so thrilled to have you here today, Richard.
Hi, Erin. Good to see you.
Today, we're going to be discussing the burgeoning market for artist products, from the Keith Haring t-shirt that I'm wearing today to things like temporary tattoos of Jean-Michel Basquiat's work and phone cases of Andy Warhol's work.
Very good. Well, I don't know where we begin because this is, I love telling people when I started out doing this in 1978, it was about the art world. People were interested in the art. They were interested in the context it was created in. It's not that they didn't care about money. They did, but it wasn't the overwhelming driving force behind collecting. And now it's gone from the art world to the art market. And now taking it a step further, art products are very much a part of the world that we're in. A lot of people will trace it back to Andy Warhol, of course, our great business artist. And the next logical step was Keith Haring's Pop Shop in New York during the 1980s. But what's gone on now, it's taken it, how do I put it, to just a whole different level. The biggest markets right now for artist products are Basquiat and Haring, Warhol to a degree as well. And I would say at this point, Basquiat has eclipsed everyone. What happened was there was a recent show, the Basquiat sisters put it on. I think it's called King Pleasure. And beautiful book. They published a wonderful catalog, put on a show of Basquiat's from the family collection. And first rate. However, they upped the ante by releasing all these products. Basquiat t-shirts, Basquiat hats, skateboard decks. This just goes on and on and on. And the funniest thing is, these things are pretty good. They're actually pretty nice. And I'm sort of embarrassed by this. I have to confess, I recently bought a Keith Haring doormat. It's a blue barking dog. It's in front of my house in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it's like, I can't believe I did this. It was about $150, but it's really nice. It was expensive. But, and I'm like, oh my God, I succumbed to this. I don't know what to say.
What do you think? Obviously, I'm also a victim of this because I'm wearing my Keith Haring Uniqlo t-shirt, but obviously I have much less of I didn't think I was surrendering to it in any way. Why were you so hesitant to get your doormat?
Well, I don't want to come across that I'm holier than thou and I'm a purist and this and that. But with the exception of Warhol, because that was part of his world, the business thing, people accepted that Andy was about products and publicity and celebrity and whatnot. So when Andy, started late in his career doing a lot of commercial things, people just said, oh, it's Warhol being Warhol. That's all fine. And like I said, when Keith did his Pop Shop, it had a certain integrity to it. Keith's logic was that, hey, anyone who can't afford a painting by me, at the very least, they can get a poster or even a little silver badge with a crawling baby on it for 75 cents or something. The idea was, it was democratic. It was like artists for all. Everyone can enjoy art. You don't have to spend a fortune. And I really believe that was sincere on Keith's part. I didn't know Keith Haring, but based on what I read about him, reading his journals and whatnot, this was really what he believed. A lot of it, had to do with the subway drawings and sharing his art with as many people as possible. Okay, so we're good with Warhol, we're good with Haring. But it's been taken to another level. Calvin Klein made a deal with the Warhol estate, I think last year, to use some of Andy's most famous paintings from the 60s on dresses. And they're good. Again, I keep saying this stuff is good. But you get into this whole thing which is, what would the artist have said if the artist was alive now?
Mm.
How would they have handled this? Was this a logical progression? Would have gone here anyway if they had been alive? Because easily Warhol, Haring, and Basquiat, certainly Haring and Basquiat could easily be alive right now. Warhol would be an old man. But they could have lived to see this. Maybe it would have gone there. We don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'm personally of the opinion, I think Andy Warhol would have been all over it. I think he would have absolutely loved seeing like people still getting Campbell soup earrings and these Calvin Klein dresses, as you said. But yeah, for other artists, like what would Haring have thought of it? I suppose we can also argue that it is continuing that plan of democratizing the art world with, you know, shops like the one I got this from, Uniqlo, kind of being a modern extension of the pop shop. But does that then dilute their intention and their legacy?
Well, that's the big question. Probably, at the end of the day, probably not. These are great artists. Their paintings hold up. They've survived the test of time. I guess it's just one of these inevitable things where you just go with the flow of the art world and art history. You can't fight it. The tide is too big. It's just keeps pushing out further and further. But then you get into this whole argument. Maybe there's just too much of everything. There are
Mm.
just too many art fairs, too many auctions, too many artists, too many art schools cranking out people with, BFA degrees. I mean, it's crazy.
Mm.
That's the biggest change I've noticed over the years, is just how big everything is. There's just too much stuff out there. On the other hand, it's probably good for the art world if it becomes more integrated in our everyday lives. I guess that's a positive development. I think that's probably where the arts are heading, not just not just the visual arts, but probably music and books, literature, movies. I think eventually, again, I'm not a great prognosticator. I'm not an art prophet, but I do think ultimately that's probably what's going to happen. Is it's all going to be a big mashup of everything. Everything will just be integrated, where you won't be able to categorize things as readily as we can now. We'll
Yeah,
see.
for sure. I think especially Warhol um was kind of the catalyst for this new breed of artists, if you like, where it's not always the art that's the most important thing, it's the brand of the artist themselves.
Yes,
And
yes.
Warhol sort of like even his name becoming a brand in itself that's like instantly recognizable and people want a slice of the pie.
Well, this is a good point. Branding is a big term now in our world.
Mm.
And, influencers, branding, I don't. It's just, you can't, I keep saying this, you can't fight it. It's just, you can't be a purist anymore. I mean, this is the truth. You go to an art museum now, you cannot look at a Frank Stella painting or a David Hockney painting and just look at the work itself without thinking, how much is this painting worth? What would it bring at Sotheby's or Christie's? I don't think it can be done anymore. I was just in Cleveland, Ohio, of all weird places. Okay, I don't know how many of your listeners have been to Cleveland, but it's a very strange place. I went to high school there. And I went down there for my 50th high school reunion. I mean, 50 years, no blink of the eye. But I managed to sneak away to the Cleveland Museum of Art, which is an outstanding museum. I'd rank it in the top 10 in the United States, which is saying something. It's outstanding. Anyway, one of my favorite paintings there is a Warhol Maryland painting. It's called Maryland Times 100. It's the biggest of all Marylands. There are literally 100 Maryland portraits. Okay, the left side of the painting, color. Right side, black and white. It used to be owned by Charles Saatchi, the big British collector, who unfortunately dumped his collection at the wrong time. Great businessman. He blew it, though, in terms of when he sold. His timing was wrong. He got bottom dollar for everything. Cleveland Museum, to their credit, bought this painting. And I'm looking at it, okay? And I spent about 10 minutes with this painting. part of it is as an art authenticator, you try to figure out, how did this guy do this? And I noticed the pencil lines where Warhol created a grid on the canvas so he knew where to drop each silk screen when he screened the work. Okay, so it was fun looking at that and getting a sense of this. But I guess the point of the whole thing is, I just simply enjoyed looking at it as a work of art. I mean, this thing was great. I mean, it was like, God, Warhol, what a genius. I mean, to have figured this out in 1962, how did this guy come up with this? Even the great art critic, Robert Hughes, who hated Warhol, he despised him. When Warhol died, he wrote an obituary in Time magazine about it. And even Hughes had to confess what Warhol did in the 60s, from 62 to 67, right before he got shot in 1968, was something akin to genius. I wouldn't say akin, it was genius.
Yeah,
You look at these things and you're like, oh my God. So I guess the point to all this is, I'm looking at this painting, and for like 10 minutes, I didn't think about money. I didn't think about, would this look good on a t-shirt? Would this look good, on a skateboard deck or on a towel or something? I just looked at the art, and it was mesmerizing. It was great. It was fun. I was happy. For 10 minutes, I was happy just looking at the art. But then reality comes back and you walk away, and I'm like, what would this thing bring now if it came up to auction? You just can't help it. So this ties into this whole product thing. It's just where it's gone.
Yeah, 100%. And also the magic of standing in front of these like very large pieces, which we're more used to now seeing on t-shirts and phone cases. I suppose the other thing, other than thinking constantly about what's this worth, it's also, getting people coming up with their phones, taking photos, like selfies with them as well. So it's, yeah, the artwork's become a big part of, the zeitgeist of social media and everybody, wanting to be seen with these things.
It's all true. And again, as I do this longer and longer, and you can't, I keep telling myself, don't fight it. Go with the flow. Let it be. It's all good. It doesn't change. I guess that was my point in looking at Maryland times 100. The art is still great. That
Yeah,
doesn't change, whether it's reproduced on a commercial product or not. The art itself, not the reproductions, not the posters, the art itself remains great. And that's what matters. That's what fuels all this. That's what powers all these products. That's the root of all this. It's still
completely.
great.
I was in New York recently on holiday and I visited every gallery. I went to the MoMA, and the first thing that's on the other side of the road is the gift shop. And, in there
Right.
you've got everything. You've got Liechtenstein, Basquiat, Haring, Warhol, all of them. T-shirts, notebooks, fridge magnets, pin badges, anything you could want. And then I walked around the MoMA for like 3 hours. And then I came out and I saw the Warhols in there. They had the soup cans and the really large gold Marilyn. Saw those, and then I came out and I said to one of the exhibition staff, I said, where are the Harings and the Basquiat works? And they said, oh, we don't have any. I said, well, then why have you got it in the gift shop? But I guess that's exactly what we're talking about today, is just people don't always care about seeing the artwork. It's about having these like trinkets of it.
Well, it's a chance. I mean, you make a good point, because MoMA does have an adequate supply of Warhols on display at
Yeah.
all times. They were late in buying Basquiat and Haring. I believe they probably own a few, but they sort of missed the boat on both those artists. I don't know what they currently own. Maybe somebody donated something, but they've probably been priced out of those markets in
Mm.
terms of getting a major example. I mean, to get a major Basquiat, 30, 40 million. Haring, much less, probably 5 to 10 million. But it's still a lot of money for a museum. Warhol, they have the best. The gold Marilyn, in my opinion, is his single greatest painting. If I had to pick one painting, that's it. There's nothing like it. They also have the original 32 soup cans on display, which are fantastic. In fact, what's so funny is they got them from Irving Blum. And I don't know if you saw the New York Times the other day. Irving Blum has got to be 90 now. He just curated a show of Liechtenstein sculptures for Gagosian Gallery. And they did a big article on that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these things, it just goes on and on. It's fascinating. But in terms of the gift shops, that's an interesting point because museum gift shops over time increasingly supply a bigger and bigger part of their budget. I mean, a lot of it is book sales and catalog sales, but it is these trinkets, it is these refrigerator magnets. This stuff adds up. The interesting thing, and something nobody's ever written about, is what do they pay for the licensing rights to do this, to reproduce these items? I've never been able to find out. The only thing I know is years ago when I did my book, I Bought Andy Warhol, the cover of it had a green fright wig. His great last self-portraits were his wig is standing up. It looks like he stuck his finger in an electric socket. It's like, it's great. Anyway, so I owned the painting at the time, but what I found out was I had to get permission. I should say the publisher had to get permission to use the image on the cover of the book. I had no idea. I owned the painting, but I could not reproduce it. I did not own the rights to reproduce it. It made no sense to me. It's like, it's my painting. I can do what I want with it. Wrong. Could not do what I want with it. What I did find out, I didn't get the dollars and cents, but I was told that the Warhol estate, I don't know about Herring and Basquiat and Lichtenstein and others, the Warhol estate, if you were buying how do I put it? If you wanted to use a Warhol image, let's say on a textbook, okay, or a novel, they would charge you one price, and it was a very reasonable price. However, if you were going to use it on a more commercial endeavor,
Different story.
product, the price went up quite a bit. But somebody really should write about what are they charging for all this? What do they make? I'm guessing the Basquiat people, what they're making is extraordinary on the licensing rights of all this. I mean, this recent Basquiat show of King Pleasure, I mean, look, it's not for me to say, but the ticket prices were very expensive. Everything cost a lot of money. To buy a Basquiat hat with a skull on it or something, $40 for a baseball player. All right, it's not insane money, but
Yeah, I was looking at this yesterday and I saw they had a sweatshirt, I think, with one of the skulls on it, not embroidered,
yeah,
just
yeah. How much was it? How much was it?
$165 or something.
See, I think I don't know. I have trouble with all that. I
Yeah,
mean, I assume the Basquiat sisters are pretty well off from their brother's estate. I mean, God knows how much money they have. And good for them. That's their good fortune, okay? But I mean, if you really want to get the art out, if you really want to honor your brother's memory, I don't know. Keep it reasonable. Let a lot of people in. Let them afford it. Let the paintings be expensive.
yeah.
Let the merchandise be affordable. That's my opinion, but it's not for me to say. Okay, so here's another story that I just thought of. All right. Postage stamps. Do you know that there's now a set of Roy Lichtenstein postage stamps here in America? These are American stamps, and they're gorgeous. Oh my God. Now, Roy's stuff is very graphic. It reproduces beautifully. But they did, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 different images of his. One is the famous play on Matisse's gold bowl of goldfish, I believe. Another is some explosion. Another is still life, a basket of fruit. There's also a German expressionist head. These stamps are terrific. And I bought some at the post office the other day. I go, man, I love these things. Okay, now that's kind of interesting because that's sort of in the middle ground. It's not being, in other words, it's not being sold at gift shops, at museums, although maybe they should.
Yeah.
It's being sold at the United States Post Office. But they're super cool. To me, that's in really good taste. You're honoring an artist's memory. And by the way, in America, the law is an artist cannot be on a US postage stamp until they've died. Isn't that strange? I guess they're worried about someone doing something bad later in life, and then they've honored him. What if he commits a crime or something? I don't know if Roy Lichtenstein would ever become a criminal, but it's an interesting thought. So anyway, all right, so here you have another product, postage stamps. But I think that's great. See, to me, that's in good taste. Everybody wins. It extends the audience for Liechtenstein's work to the American public who buys the stamps. It honors Roy's memory, it keeps his legacy going, and it's super cool. So
Yeah. And it's also
another
that it's that lovely thing of relatively inexpensive stamps. You're then able to share his work with whoever you're sending your mail to.
true. I think the going rate for US postage stamp is 66 cents.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you can buy a whole sheet for under 20 bucks.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. You could frame it.
Hey, you
That would
could.
look really cool.
Um, Here's a fun question for us to explore.
Sure.
If we take our big pop artists, Warhol, Haring, Lichtenstein, Basquiat to an extent, if they were still alive and they were to endorse or create merch or a product, what do you think each of them would make?
I don't know. I guess this is just a guess. You know what a giclée print is?
Yes.
You know that term? I mean, for your listeners, it's basically a high quality reproduction of a painting. In other words, printers have gotten to be so good, they can match any color. It's perfection. You don't get the same surface, but it looks awfully good at 10 feet back. You can see
Yeah.
these things. My guess is Warhol would have done giclées of
Mm.
his paintings, and they would have been massive editions of 5,000 or 10,000. He would have signed them, and I don't know what he would have sold them for, but I think that's where it would have gone. I
Mm.
think he would just used the technology of the times to, he would
In
have
a
embraced
way,
it.
in a
Yeah.
way very similar to Damien Hirst.
Well, Hearst isn't it now. There's an interesting question. Okay. Hearst, I don't know what to make of. I think when he started out, he was a great artist, with the sharks, and I loved his shelves with pills on them. I think
Yeah.
they're beautiful. They're fantastic. But I think as time went on, you just sense it's a money grab. I mean, there's like, come on, there's just too much of everything. And I think it reached its apex when he did that skull encrusted in diamonds, and
Yeah.
he couldn't sell it, and he had to put together a consortium of buyers, of which I heard, was the biggest. You realize, I mean, just stop it. You know, it's always like, can you top this? I don't know what it has to do with art after a while.
Yeah.
It's anything to get attention. So I don't know about this.
We've had recently he's released two print series with Henny, and instead of a regular print run, we usually determine the number of prints that they'll produce before they make them, and then Warhol would make 250 and then they would be sold. What Hearst is doing now is he's showing the artwork, putting them online, and then saying the edition size will be determined by how many people want to buy them. So then you get like 3,214 people is your edition size, because it's purely about who's willing to buy.
I mean, it's fine. It's a gimmick. You know what it is? It's just, I don't know. I just don't know what to say after a while. I mean, fine. You're great at marketing. You're a very good marketer, Damien Hirst. And the sad thing is, the guy has talent. He really doesn't need to do this. His prints are beautiful. I like the ones with the butterflies,
Yeah,
imagery. I think they're beautiful. They're
yeah,
great. But Hearst is, he's a character. I mean, one of the famous stories was he did a show at Gagosian in Los Angeles. This is a number of years ago. And I think they were the ones, they may have been the butterfly paintings with the actual butterflies in them. And they look like stained glass window panels, almost like cathedral panels. They're beautiful. I mean, I give the guy credit. They were great. All right. So apparently the major collector, Eli Broad, who's passed away, there's the Broad Museum in Los Angeles. I guess Eli was out of town, something happened, and the paintings all sold out. And, he was probably Gagosian's biggest client at the time, if I had to guess. And Eli calls up Larry, and I heard this from one of the directors at the gallery, so I know it's probably true. And he says, Larry, I got shut out. I didn't get my Hearst painting. I want to, or something. And Larry at first is like, well, they're all gone, you snooze, you lose, that sort of, I don't know if he said that to me, probably did. And Eli goes, no, 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 I want to, and I'll pay whatever it is. And, I don't know how much money these things are, probably $1 million. And I guess Larry gets on the phone and calls Damien Hirst up and says, oh, do me a favor, make 2 more of these for Eli Broad. Okay, sure. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But again, this is what it is. It's just like, I don't know what to say to all this. This
Yeah.
is where it's, you know.
For me, I think that's maybe the exact same approach that Warhol would have today, to be
Could
honest.
be, could
Yeah.
be. I mean, you wonder how much money you need after a while.
Yeah.
I mean, how much do you need? You can only eat one steak at a time. You can only drive one car at a time. You know what I mean? It's like, how much do you need?
Yeah.
It's, I don't know. Maybe there will be a reckoning at some point where some of these artists uh, start thinking about where is this really going? You know?
While we're on this topic of, artists taking commission to rake the money in, I suppose, you must tell your fantastic story about almost having to commission some portraits to meet Warhol.
Oh, okay, we could do that, and maybe that'll be the last story. I don't want to exhaust your listeners with these stories. This will go on all day long. You really want to hear this? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, all right. Back in the day, this would have been 1986, and it would have been the fall of 86. Warhol died, by the way, in February of 1987. So this was probably, I'm guessing, November of 86. The only time I ever met Warhol, I went there because I was going to do a show at my gallery. It's called Acme Art in San Francisco, and made an appointment with Fred Hughes, who was Andy's business manager, and someone who I thought was more interesting than Andy personally. Hughes was fantastic. Um, anyway, um, I told him we're doing a show. I did buy a painting from him that day. It was a dollar sign. It was 20 by 16 inches, had a retail of $6,500. Unbelievable. And they gave it to me for 4,500. So I got a good deal. All right. So anyway, I said, all right, all right. We'd really like Andy to come to our opening. We're doing this great show in San Francisco. What are the chances of that happening? And Fred looks me in the eye and says, that'll be $50,000. I go, what do you mean? I got to give him $50,000. He goes, no, 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 no. You have to guarantee us 2 portrait commissions at $25,000 each. And I go, what do you mean? He says, well, you're asking Andy to give up 3 days of his life. I go, how do you figure that? He says, well, 1 day to fly from New York to San Francisco, then the day of your opening, and then another day to fly back to New York. You're asking a lot. And unfortunately, I just didn't know the right people at the time. I do now, but I just didn't have people who could write a check for 25,000 for a Warhol portrait just on a whim, because their egos, they wanted to be immortalized by Andy. And I was so disappointed. I was like, oh man, it would have been so cool. Whatever, Warhol made a very good living off these portraits at the end of his career. He made a lot of money from this. And the ironic thing is, even though these portraits were super commercial, I mean, he'd make everyone look absolutely gorgeous. He was a genius. No matter how unattractive the man or woman was, believe me, some of these people were not good looking. They looked like movie stars. I mean, he just a little nip and tuck here, a little airbrush there, and oh my God, he made everyone happy. Unbelievable. But Warhol, whatever it took.
Yeah. I
So
mean, it literally just sounds like the social media effect today, making everybody look picture perfect, and that's the way you're presented.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. Again, the great artists always reflect their times, but they also anticipate the future. And
Yeah.
Warhol was a great avatar of all this. It's all true. I mean, it's legit, the whole thing, what he did.
Yeah.
So yeah, but
I also wonder, obviously, you met him once, but even
once.
yeah, being around the pop artists in that era, when did you really start to see this kind of merch becoming commercialized? Like when were the first? Obviously, the pop shop was one instance.
It's really recent years.
Yeah.
When I was my heyday in the art business was really the 80s. That's when I was involved heavily. And I did meet all these artists. You could meet James Rosenquist, you could meet Jasper Johns, you could meet Robert Rauschenberg, you could meet Roy Lichtenstein. If you were respectful, if you did your homework, so you knew what you were talking about when you spoke to them, and if you were, had good manners, you can meet all these guys. It wasn't a big deal. It's not like what it is now. Um, but they really, it, it really wasn't like that. It was really about the art. I mean, they all wanted to make money. They all wanted a home in the Hamptons. They all wanted to live well, but they did care about art history. How would they rank? How would they be remembered? Would the work hold up? They did care about that stuff. I think that's all true. Um, when did it change? I'd say in the last 10 years, in the last decade. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think post 2008, when the art market came back in a big way, um, it coincides with this art as investment thing. I think there's a big overlap there.
Mm.
I mean, now you have companies selling fractional shares of paintings.
Yeah.
And, how do we monetize this? How do we hold it for a few years and then sell it off? I mean,
Mm.
it's so silly. But don't get me started on that. Maybe we can tell some stories about that another time.
Yeah.
I'd say in the last 10 years, and it, there's an expression that a tree doesn't grow to the sky. I'm not sure that's true. This just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it's going to go, but I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you'll be able to buy a house in the future with Herring and Basquiat designs incorporated, around the window frames. There'll be barking Keith Haring dogs around the window frames. And,
Are you familiar?
Basquiat crown on the chimney. I mean, it keeps getting, ridiculous.
Are
I
you
don't,
familiar with Mr. Doodle?
I've heard the name, their
Yeah.
images.
Mr. Doodle has got a very similar um visual culture, shall we say, to Keith Haring, with the continuous line, like very graphic.
Right,
Is.
right.
And he has bought a house, painted it all in white, the whole thing, every single room, the exterior, and marketed the whole house with his,
There you
yeah.
go.
So
This is what
already
I'm saying.
exists.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
you go. I mean, that's the next thing. You incorporate it into your daily lifestyle. All this,
Yeah.
how you live, not just the products, not just a drinking glass with an image on it. Maybe your whole house has that
Yeah.
stuff going. I don't know. It's fun to
Yeah.
talk about. Anyway,
Suppose my other question um is, when we think about, obviously, other artists like the neo-expressionists who were equally prevalent in art history, why have the pop artists, particularly Haring, Warhol, Basquiat, Lichtenstein, why have they been chosen to, be on everything, be on merch? Why then?
um, probably because their stuff is highly graphic and it reproduces beautifully. When you think about it, Warhol's photo silk screens, very strong graphic qualities. Obviously, Lichtenstein with the cartoon-like imagery really pops when you reproduce it. Basquiat, a little more complicated. Stuff's a little messier, not as crisp. Herring, again, dogs, babies, dancing figures reproduce well. I think a lot of it is they have strong graphic qualities, but it's their story. Okay, let's look at it this way. There are very few artists in art history who have transcended being just painters. In other words, these are figures who are part of popular culture, where people are as interested in the clothes they're wearing, they're as interested in their lifestyle choices, how they live, who they hang with. Um, the big names, of course, were people, well, at least in America, the names were Jackson Pollock, I would say Georgia O'Keeffe, Andy Warhol, and Basquiat and Haring are sort of on their way toward becoming these myths. They're transcending just being mere artists. And as they produce merchandise, they're more integrated into popular culture in America and the rest of the world. Obviously, other names are like Picasso, Frida Kahlo. People can't get enough of these guys. I mean, you see Frida Kahlo tote bags. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. George O'Keeffe is a god there. I
Yeah.
mean, her stuff. Somebody was walking around the other day with an O'Keeffe umbrella, with a big calla lily. It's like I it's like this it's like this tide. It just keeps pushing out further and further. But a lot of it is, yeah, they reproduce beautifully, these artists. That's a big part of the reason why.
Yeah.
And the other half is their life stories are fantastic.
Yeah.
And that Basquiat story is unbelievable. It's great.
Yeah. And even I suppose when we go back to the imagery itself, the stories behind those images and what they mean, the political motivations behind them, I suppose that's what people want to literally wear on their sleeve.
They're making a statement.
Yeah.
When you wear work by these artists, you are making a statement. You identify with them on some level. Could be politically, could be visually, could be nothing. You might just think, boy, I like that. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when people wear products designed by artists, they are making a statement. And a lot of it's to get attention. You will get attention when you wear these things. Can't
Yeah.
help it. It's fun. I guess there's a fun element to all of this too, which you can't overlook. So
Yeah. I suppose also it's that sense of community among art lovers. It's, if you see,
yes,
this is a classic thing, if you see somebody wearing a band t-shirt and you think, do they actually know who that band is, or are they just wearing the t-shirt because they think it's cool? Let's maybe segue back and have a think. What would Basquiat, if he were to endorse merch, what do you think he would make today?
geez, I don't know. He'd probably make hats that look like crowns.
Nice, yeah.
That would be a guess. Golden crown. You'd wear
Yeah.
these felt hats and you'd walk around.
Uh, yeah, and I
Just
feel like Herring would just carry on t-shirts and hoodies that were not 100.
hoodies. I think I could see Keith wore hoodies himself, so I think that would make sense. I think
Yeah,
he liked these. And Keith
yeah,
liked wearing, I think he wore, I don't know if he wore Air Jordan tennis shoes or athletic shoes, but he liked that stuff, I think.
yeah,
Keith, he identified with the street vibe very much so.
yeah. Do you think that these merchandise products, do you think they dilute their legacy in any way, or fundamentally is this just the ultimate manifestation of pop art?
Um, Initially, I was dead set against all this.
Mm.
I was like, you don't need to do these things, or your estates don't need to do this. You've made enough money. Your place is assured in art history. It's all good. Focus on the legacy of the art itself. Why not do that? It's great art. There are an endless number of exhibitions that could be put together, different facets of the artist's career, different imagery, different moments. It's endless what they could do. Um, my thinking has sort of evolved, as I indicated earlier, to just say, this is where it's going, and you can't fight it, and you better, deal with it. Better be okay with it. And I'm trying to look the other way and say, yeah, it's there is a fun aspect to all this,
Mm.
and it's lively, and I do get a kick out of seeing people wearing these items, these like running shoes with
Yeah,
Basquiat imagery on them. I do smile when I see that, and maybe that's just a good thing. I keep saying this. It doesn't change the art.
yeah,
The art is still great, and that's what matters. The art still holds up. Does it dilute their achievements? No.
yeah,
Nah. I used to think it would, but that was 10 years ago.
yeah.
Like I said, when I saw that Warhol Maryland times 100, I realized the art's still great. It's fine. There's
And
room for everything, I guess.
yeah, and if anything, I suppose, for perhaps younger people who wouldn't have been inside, the Tate or the MoMA to see the originals, maybe buying a t-shirt is your first gateway into that.
It could be. I mean, maybe it does allow them to eventually, as they make more money, move up and buy a great print by one of these artists. Maybe it does. Maybe you're right. It could be a gateway to collecting art. And
Mm.
that would be a good thing. Sure, why not?
Yeah. The final thing
Sure.
I wanted us to just muse on is, maybe do you think these products eventually will become part of a lexicon of art history? There'll be things, these t-shirts and phone cases will eventually be in the art history books themselves.
My answer to that is no.
No.
I don't think there will be, no. I think it's a very separate category.
Mm.
I think future art historians will be obviously aware of all this, but I don't see books on art history including these things. There's so much depth to the art itself to talk about. I think they're just scratching the surface of a lot of these artists, and you're realizing how great a lot of this work really was. It takes time. You know, people just can't see things when you're in the moment. Like I think I said earlier, the great artists, they see beyond the obvious. They can sort of get beyond the current moment of the current zeitgeist that they're living in. They project into the future. Um, they reflect their times, but the great artists, they they get us to look at the world differently. They get you to see your surroundings in a different way. And sometimes it just takes years or decades till you can reflect on all that they gave to us. Where it's like, wow, we had no idea when Warhol was doing celebrities that our celebrity culture would be huge. I don't know if you remember this, but O.J. Simpson, when he was fleeing this crime scene, he was driving this white Bronco, and you have helicopters hovering over the freeway shooting video of it. And we're watching this on the 6 o'clock news. And it's all like, well, Warhol sort of anticipated our obsession with celebrities and what they did. I mean, people always liked movie stars, but it wasn't like, oh my God, the Kardashians and things like that. It's like nobody, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I don't know anymore.
Yeah.
But great artists, they point the way.
Maybe that's why the pop artists are, you know, the main ones. I know we spoke about Frida Kahlo, but it's just Keith Haring, Basquiat, and Warhol are inescapable. And yeah, maybe that's because we are
And they
living.
will get bigger, and they will get bigger. It's sort of like the Beatles. You know, the Beatles, you know, as time goes on, it gets bigger and bigger. I mean, it's just like, it's still great to look back on this stuff. And we're still interested in Paul McCartney and what he's doing and how he's living and the music he's still making. It's still fascinating to everyone. I don't think that's going to change. The stuff exponentially seems to get bigger. And I think that's true with Warhol and Basquiat and Haring. And this is why people will continue to collect their work. It's just, you want to touch it. You want it in your life. You want to connect with it.
It's a connection. Yeah, and a connection to that cult of celebrity. And as we said at the beginning, you know, the artist as a brand has never been more important.
Yes. I agree. It's all true.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us today on MyArtBroker Talks. It's been such a fantastic conversation.
Thank you, Erin. Always fun. And what I like about doing this, it does, you know, it does get, at least on a personal level, it does get me to reflect on all I've seen and just where this is all going. So it's always a lot of fun for me. Thank you.
And that's the best thing about art history.
Yes.
Thanks, Richard. Bye.
Bye-bye.